You could have retired probably by now 5 or 6 or 7 times. Why not just hang up the hat?
That's such a great question. I was making everybody else millionaires. So I was just like, well, this is just too easy. So I started my own team. The first year in business was in the top 1% of all realtors in the state of Florida. At 25, I was diagnosed with colon cancer, but it pushed me. It was the greatest gift I ever had, because then it reinforced that message that I had growing up of tomorrow's never promised. So go and live for today and go and build what you want to build as big as you want to build it. I'm sitting before you and I'm telling you that this is going to be the largest brokerage globally that's ever been done.
Welcome back to another episode of the Austin Zaback Show. Today we have a very special guest, somebody that I've been wanting to get on actually for quite a while, a guy by the name of Michael Valdes. And Michael has a hell of a story, okay? He is truly doing some massive stuff in the world of retail real estate, okay? So I just want to preface the podcast before I bring Michael on. If you are a real estate agent, if you're a team leader, if you're a broker, if you have any desire of getting into the world of retail real estate, this is going to be a podcast you're going to want to stay to the very end of, okay? So I highly encourage you to do that. We're going to peel back his story, how he's been able to do what he's been able to do. And I'll just give you a cliff note right out of the gate. Michael has actually, at one point in time, overseen 113 countries, okay? And he's actually taken over 7 brokerages into 86 different countries around the world. Michael Valdes, I appreciate you being here, brother.
Brother, I love being here right now. And what you guys have done has been amazing. So it's great for this chat. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, of course, man. So we went to dinner last night. We had a great conversation. We were actually in Vegas.
Yes.
And so we've been hanging out a lot.
I know. I've seen you all week.
Exactly. And I was like, I told you, I was like, dude, you got to come on the podcast. Right.
And here I am.
And here you are.
I was so close. I had to do it.
Yeah. And it'll be a good one, right? Because, I really want to do a deep dive. A lot of my listeners, I would argue probably over 50% of my listeners do real estate or they want to get into real estate, right? And I've put a lot of content out over the years about my journey as an agent and the different brokerages that I've been with and why I've been at different brokerages at different times. And so we're going to dive into all that. But before we do, talk to me a bit about, like, how in the hell did you get to a place where you're overseeing 113 countries, and then after that you take, over 7 brokerages to 86 different countries? I mean, back up in time, right? You were an investment banker. Walk me through your childhood. Tell me kind of the quick story of how you go from that to being an investment banker to getting into real estate.
Yeah, man. So that's it's going to be. We'll give you some synopsis here. Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me on the show. So I'm born and raised in New York City, and after school decided to go to the West Coast and started an entrepreneurial little company, which was really doing a catering company that was focused on wrap parties for films. And so then from there, I sold that company. And this was like my first company that I sold. I think I was 21.
Wow.
And from there, decided to start an entertainment company.
Okay.
So I started an entertainment company with a friend of mine who was the film commissioner for Mexico. And he and I started this company, and he was running it out of Mexico. I was running it out of LA. We were at Raleigh Studios down the street from Paramount Studios. Didn't know what the hell we were doing. We were all in our 20s. And so this was a really way before the internet, way before anything else. So what we would do is that we would actually get the rights to movies that were going straight to video. That's a term that many of your people won't even know what that means. So it was going straight to video. We would buy the rights wholesale, and then we would go to all of the film festivals that were happening and sell the country rights to all of the films that were going straight to video.
Wow.
And so we ended up running that company really successfully. And then we actually started doing a record label. And we did a record label where the way that you got a new band noticed was through college radio stations. And so I was actually really close to Olivia Newton-John's older sister, who was like my surrogate mom. That's a whole other story. Won't even get into that one. So her son became my head of AR because it was like, had the last name, was really working well, was doing all of the college radio station like calls and things. So we actually ran a successful company. And we started with cutting off different parts of that company. So we sold the record company. It was called Zenith Entertainment. So we sold off Z Records to Geffen Records. We sold off the distribution company to TV Azteca that was part of Univision. So we basically sort of did an arbitrage, sold all of it off. And now I'm sitting there in my early 20s, and it was just like, okay, now I've sold 2 companies in my early 20s, and I got into banking. And I jumped into the banking world. I was 23, 24 years old. At 25, became the first Latino director of Deutsche Bank in the United States.
Wow.
And kept running from there and built a really successful career in banking. And then 9/11 happened. So had a different sort of risk management that was happening. I had a focus of American Indian tribes. So I actually focused on casino revenues and diversifying casino revenues. So there was a bit of a loophole. So all casino revenue, all American Indian tribes were tax-free. And then there was an opportunity for somebody coming in under a JV. And if you were the junior partner of that JV, you inherited the tax-free status. So we had a lot of structures that we were doing under that. I was one of 4 bankers in the U.S. that were focusing on this. And then after 9/11, everything changed. Risk management changed. All those deals went away almost overnight. And then I decided 10-year lifespan of a banker before you become inhumane is probably the shelf life. So I decided to leave. I started buying properties in Miami. So I started buying properties in Miami in 2003. Decided to get licensed for my own portfolio. That was the only reason I got licensed. And then I started collecting a large amount of real estate. And then I actually met the person who had the first franchise for Sotheby's in the United States when they started franchising. And so this guy had all of South Florida, the Caribbean, and a few other territories. So we met. I started just talking, had no interest of getting into the business at all. Long story short, he had the first reality show for real estate ever in 2004 for TLC. It was called $1 Million Agent.
Okay.
And this dude used to sell he used to sell properties via helicopter. So would get the client up on the helicopter, all sold sort of like ultra luxury properties. And so it was a really fun ride. And so I actually got licensed and decided to run his team. I ran his team for about 6 months, increased productivity about 40%, and then decided I was making everybody else millionaires. So I was just like, well, this is just too easy. So I started my own team. And I started my own team at late 2004. My very first sale was the penthouse at the Fontainebleau Hotel for $6 million.
Wow.
And 20 years ago. And so I was like, well, this is fun. And created a team. The first year in business was in the top 1% of all realtors in the state of Florida, and built a really successful business. And it was during the crash and everything else, and most people were actually hurting, of course, in 2008 and 2009. It was the best year I ever had. So I had all of my clients that I had from the banking world. There was something called vulture funds that were coming in. And vulture funds were actually in Las Vegas and in Miami were the 2 cities where they were most prevalent, where properties went down almost 50% during the crisis. And so they would come in, buy everything at bulk, and then sort of hold on to them for their own portfolios and go into rentals. And the first person that I had met through my banking world actually put me on retainer to go and look at everything that was coming on. I hired 3 new people. We crushed it that year.
Wow.
And then in 2009, the person that I started working with went bankrupt. And then I actually tried to buy the franchise and got outbid. And then through a long series of things in 2010 is when I actually moved over to the corporate side of the world. And I moved to London for Sotheby's to build their European network. And I was there for about 4 years, came back to the States, started running all of the operations for Sotheby's. And then in my last 2 years of my career at Realogy, actually ended up running all of the brands for their global expansion. And I did that until 2020, and then met Glenn Sanford, joined EXP, ran their international expansion, had an incredible growth trajectory, and we're going to break some of this down.
Yep.
And then beginning of this year, met Robert Palmer at the Super Bowl, loved what his vision was, and moved over here about 3 months ago.
Wow. What a hell of a story. That's fascinating. We could talk about just your story for the next 2 hours. What I am curious about right out of the gate, because I like to ask every entrepreneur. I've had a lot of legendary people sit right where you're sitting right now, right? And I'm always curious, are you born with it? Or you sold your first company at 21 years old, your second company by 22 or 23.
Yeah.
Are you born an entrepreneur? Are people born entrepreneurs? Or is it something you acquire over time?
That's such a great question. And, and I've tried to analyze this a few times as well. So I had an interesting background. So my dad had a sort of political career in Cuba, which is where he was born. And so he was Batista's chief legal counsel. And because of that, he was a political prisoner when Castro came in, and he was released during the Bay of Pigs in a prisoner exchange program, all before I was born. But there was this whole sort of thing where you build something and tomorrow's never promised, right? So go do it, right? And so there was that type of thing where you've got to sort of build, because if you're waiting until tomorrow, tomorrow may not be here. So I've always grew up with that. And it was something that was like a big push. But I'll tell you, the second thing that really changed me was that at 25, I was diagnosed with colon cancer. And it was a genetic defect that just ran in my family. And so you're never sort of should be considering your own mortality in your 20s. But it pushed me. It was the greatest gift I ever had. Because then it reinforced that message that I had growing up of tomorrow's never promised. So go and live for today. And go and build what you want to build as big as you want to build it.
Yeah.
And it's like when you start sort of hearing, and I think that was a great gift, because in your 20s, you're sort of shaped by what people think about you. And it's sort of and I didn't give a shit. It was sort of it was a great sort of freeing moment where you're just sort of focused on do what you want to do with go through life, hurt the least amount of people you can hurt, go build what you can sort of build. And that's it, man. So it was, I don't know if it's sort of part of your environment or part of but there's got to be a spirit of that you're born with.
Sure. Yeah. There has to be. I think, for me, right, it is a big chip on my shoulder. You know what I mean? You want to prove to the world, right? Yeah. And I don't think that ever goes away. And I think a lot of it has to do with your upbringing, right, and the people you're around.
Sure.
You're the average of the 5 people you spend your time with, right?
1,000,000%.
So,
something to that point, something that I always sort of say, which I think it's really controversial. You sort of say it's sort of you've got to take stock of that. And one of the greatest things you can do for yourself is to fire your friends. Whoever's not around you to support your dreams shouldn't have the privilege of being around you.
I love that. Yeah. I literally just had this conversation with my fiance. She's not in here right now. You met her about, just friend groups. And I said, listen, you might not realize in the moment, but over a long enough period of time, if you're around the wrong people, they'll start to rub off on you. It doesn't matter how strong you are, how disciplined you are. Because a lot of people, they hang out with people and they think oh, I'll rub off on them. Yeah. It's no, they're going to rub off on you. It might take time, but they're eventually going to, right? You have to be very careful who you hang out with. I've told people before, I said it on Ryan Pineda's podcast yesterday, I said, there's been a couple times in my life where I could have gone the wrong way and it would have ended very badly. Yeah. And it was a decision of me walking away from my friend group at each one of those times that got me to where I am today.
It's so true. Yeah. And it happens. And you have to stop and take stock at different points in your life, right? Yeah. Because when you think you're sort of oh man, I'm doing great. Until you turn around and you look around and you sort of create another group of people around you. Right now, Robert's my greatest influence. Yeah. It's sort of seeing the lifestyle that he was been able to accomplish when, he's younger than me. It's sort of it actually pushes me to do more.
Yeah. You could have retired probably by now 5 or 6 or 7 times, and you haven't, right? At 21, maybe, I don't know how much you sold your first company for, maybe your second company, by the time you get into investment banking, why not just hang up the hat? Why not just go chill on the beach, right? What is it about you and entrepreneurs in general that keeps you going even though you don't probably have to?
part of it is now the responsibility of giving back to others. Like, you know, you're not going to sort of like die with it. So why not show other people how to sort of do it? Why not show other people how to really sort of like let them sort of go through a path that you might have already gone through, right? Look, there's a pothole down there. It's sort of like, don't drive the car there, right? It's sort of like, there's now, the success leaves clues. It always does, right? It's sort of like, and I always say success is a math problem. You work backwards to where you want to be and you put the effort in based on those. There is a roadmap. People have done it before, right? It's sort of like, why can't sort of like you be the next Bezos, right? It's sort of like, why can't you be the one that's worth hundreds of billions of dollars?
Yeah.
Right? It's sort of like, somebody else did it, right? It's sort of like the roadmap is there.
It's like the Michael Bannister story, right? He was the first guy to run the 5-minute mile.
Yeah.
You know, nobody had ever done it.
Exactly.
Ever in history, right?
Exactly.
And then he does it. And I don't know the exact stats, so if you're watching, Google it on your own. But after he did it, in the next 6 months,
Correct.
after he did it,
Correct.
like a dozen people did it.
That's right.
Because they saw somebody do it.
That's right. Right?
Yeah.
It's sort of like we do our own limitations. It's sort of like until somebody proves that that limitation can be broken.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It is truly amazing.
It's amazing.
I want to talk a bit about real estate, and I want to start by talking about the journey, right? So like, we'll just peel back the onion. You got into, so you're an investment banker, and then you get in, you start buying property in Florida. Were you flipping property in Florida? What were you doing? Okay,
yeah,
got it.
I was.
Like developing, just flipping?
No, I was actually just buying properties that I liked and I wanted, and then just started flipping.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And
so learned that one real early on, even
Yeah.
before I got licensed, right? And it was the idea that there was a great, because it was all luxury real estate, right? Once you sort of get to a certain level of 7 and 8 figure properties, it's sort of like, it's a fun ride, right?
Yeah. And all in Miami, Fort Lauderdale area?
Nope, it was all in Miami.
All in Miami.
I was all in Miami at that point. Just it was just my focal point. I never actually invested in Broward County.
Yeah. And you say, you know, that you became an agent completely out of necessity of just doing your own deals.
Look, you're sort of looking at the P&L.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why am I paying somebody like, you know, tens of thousands of dollars to close this deal that it's sort of like, I've done most of the work.
Yeah.
You know, most times I found the property myself and said, I want to go see that. And then it was just like, yeah, like, okay, looking at everything that sort of like, I'm very analytical just because I really came from that banking world. So I'm looking at the P&L and I'm like, why am I looking at this line item? And it's like, when I have the time, I'll just go get licensed for my own portfolio. And that was the only reason I ever got licensed.
It's crazy. And it's crazy how that leads to where we're about to talk about, right?
Crazy.
It really is wild. And what's even crazier, and I think I told you at dinner last night, but I got my license for the exact same reason.
Yeah.
Different scale, different level. I wasn't flipping $1 million homes, but I was wholesaling and flipping.
Sure.
And my mentor at the time was like, go become an agent. And I was like, I don't think I want to become an agent, you know? And sure enough, you know, he's like, well, you should go do it. And I was like, okay. And I went and did it. I did the 5-day crash course or the 6-day crash course or whatever it was, you know? And within 2 weeks, I was licensed.
Yeah.
You know, and then I never thought I was going to own a big team, let alone the #1 real estate team in the state of Arizona, which we're going to talk about in a little while. Soon to be nationally, which we're going to get your help with. Yeah, we're going to dive deep. So then you go from flipping, you become an agent, you're flipping houses, you're doing very well. And then you go to this you move to London, which I feel like is a pretty big change. Yeah. Right? It's just like kind of out of the blue, like I'm going to move to London.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do national expansion for Russ Lyons Sotheby's.
No, it wasn't Russ Lyons. It was all corporate.
All corporate.
All corporate. Yeah. So Russ Lyons and all that, those are all franchises.
Okay.
So it was all the corporate offices. And so I moved to London, and my mom is from Madrid, so I spent a lot of time in Europe as a kid, and so I loved Europe, and so I moved to London. Had a great time there, but it was culture shock, right? Even though it's the same language and everything, it's culture shock because it's a different environment, it's a different culture, it's a different way of sort of like just living. Yeah. Right? It's sort of like, you got to get a television license to watch television in England. And I'm just like, what? And so it's like, I couldn't open up a bank account. And I was just like, what are you talking about? Like literally couldn't get a cell phone because I had no credit in the UK. And I'm like, guys, it's sort of like, I've got the resources. I can afford a cell phone. Right. But it was like this craziness that there was like that transition time of trying to settle in. But then once you settle in, it was actually fantastic. I loved living there.
Walk me through in that season of your life. What did that day to day look like of growing? You're working at the corporate level and doing that.
Yeah.
Like what were you doing exactly at that
It was
time?
really fun. It was understanding that it was all relationship building. It was no different. It was the idea that a lot of what you do is all about relationships. Nobody does anything in a vacuum. Nobody does anything singularly. Everyone got help from someone else. And so the idea was that the European network that was existing in Sotheby's in this instance, they were all working in their own little fiefdoms. Nobody was talking to one another. And so I literally just did a European tour of all the franchises that were available. And you sit across from them and over dinner and you start sort of like creating a rapport. After the second bottle of wine, the problems seem a lot less hectic. Yeah. And then you just start sort of creating that camaraderie with people. And I did the first thing, which was a European conference. And I brought all the European franchise owners into, I think it was Portugal at the time. And they all met for the first time. And they had all bought franchises, but no one spoke to one another. And the referrals went up exponentially that first year. Wow. And then it just created a platform for what we actually ended up doing. So I ended up, I think it was 65 or 70 countries that I opened for Sotheby's over the career. And it was just extraordinary to sort of like think about the idea of setting that network based on just communication that then translates into revenue and sales.
Sure.
I mean, it's really simple.
It is crazy. You know, I mean, we're all familiar with the saying, it's not about what you know, but who you know.
That's right.
Right? And, you know, and I'm the kind of guy, and I've said it many times, you know, that, you know, you can ask me a question. If I don't have the answer, somebody in my phone book does.
Exactly.
And I'll call them and get it for you.
That's right.
You know, and I'll make the connection, right?
Yeah.
So I love that. Walk me through, just because I'm fascinated by, you know, a lot of people that maybe are entrepreneurs, aspiring team leaders, brokerage owners, agents, stuff like this. You know, when you go in and you embark on a new role, right? Like that, you know, you go from investment banking to flipping houses to doing all these different things. And then all of a sudden you move to London and you're kind of in a new box, if you will, right? Like a box that you had never been in at that point.
I never thought I wanted.
Never thought you even wanted.
Yeah.
Probably didn't even know a ton about it at the time.
No, of course not.
You know?
Yeah.
Walk me through, what does it take to do something that you don't know much about and then dominate it beyond anything anybody could have ever expected? Like, is it just extreme confidence and the fire ready aim mentality, like jump off the cliff, build the parachute on the way down?
Without a doubt.
Okay.
But that's also the idea that you've got to remember that the person on the other side doesn't know what this looks like either, right? So when it's like, okay, let's go build a European network. What the hell does that look like? Right? And so you're talking to the other side. I remember my first meeting that I had there was in Frankfurt. And they were like newly sort of like new owners and stuff like this. And so I'm like, I don't even know what I'm going to say to them. And it was just like going through and just talking to them. It all sort of grew organically. Like there was no, because I'm in my head, it's sort of like, I got to pitch them. It's sort of like, this is going to be a great freaking sort of idea. This is going to be a network, sort of like, and I threw all that out literally as I walked through the threshold of the office. And it's sort of like, and part of it was just sort of like, forget it. I'm just like, it's like, I don't have anything. I don't have anything to show you. And so it's sort of like, so I'm just going to talk to you. And it was like the greatest sort of thing, because that took 3 hours. They told me everything that was bothering them. And I was just like, well, we can fix that. It's like not a big deal. It's like, had I walked in with like a canned presentation and this is like what my whole vision is. Yeah. It was like, it would have fallen on deaf ears. Right. It was sort of like, and that has served me so well. Right. It's sort of like, let's just talk about what the issue is. And it's like, then let's figure it out. Right. It's sort of like, let's work backwards. You know, it's like the other great thing is you always step into the future that you want to create as though you have it today. Right? It's sort of like, you know, I remember I had Ryan Serhan on my podcast a couple of years ago. And so he told me the story, and I loved the visual of what he said to me. And he said, Michael, look, it's sort of like anything that I shoot today, will take 9 months after it gets edited and everything else before it's actually going to be on television. So whatever is being shot today, when it shows 9 months later, I have to be that agent 9 months from today, because that's what you're going to see. I was like, that's good.
Wow.
That was good. And it was such a great analogy.
Mm-hmm.
And the visual was something that was like perfect. So whoever you actually are aspiring to be in the future, you've got to act like it today.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's sort of like now with with LPT, we haven't opened any international office yet. We're opening one up we're opening Canada before the end of the year. But right now I'm sitting before you and I'm telling you that this is going to be the largest brokerage globally that's ever been done.
And it's already done.
It's done.
In your
it's
mind.
done in my head.
In your head, it's
because
done.
I know what the formula is.
Yeah.
I know the people that we have. I know Robert's vision is aligned with mine. And so I'm sitting right here and I'm telling you that it's going to be the largest real estate company ever.
Yeah. I can't wait to peel back that onion. Before we do, really quick, I want to know, it's such a fine line. When I've sit with entrepreneurs, because I'm the same way, right? So I've this saying, I live in the future. The majority entrepreneurs live in the future.
You have to.
And the future, by default, when you're an entrepreneur, because every entrepreneur is an optimist, not a pessimist, right? You have to be an optimist by the very nature of being an entrepreneur.
Sure.
The future has to be better than the present, otherwise we wouldn't wake up in the morning, right? We have to believe that, right? So, but if we're living in the future, and the future has to be better than the present, when do we live in the present? And not always live in the future. Because if you're always living in the future, then a lot of people say, well, then you're not enjoying life. How do you navigate? I'm just curious. How do you navigate that?
I love that very philosophical question. But I think that you don't sort of like hope that the future is better. You create that, right? It's sort of like you've got the power of creation. So as an entrepreneur, you know that you can create things. Yep. So you're creating your future. Right? You just sort of said you're going to build the largest team nationwide, right? I believe you. And so that's your future because you're creating your future now. So whatever you're creating now today, and you're being very present in today in creating tomorrow. So I don't think that they're separate.
Got it.
I think that it's a continuum of that.
I like that answer.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Okay, so before we get to LPT, because we're going to get there and we're going to stay there for a minute.
Okay.
You meet Glenn. Okay, so we're hearing the story, right? You meet Glenn, and now at this point in time, correct me if I'm wrong, EXP is the first brokerage to completely change the entire model. I mean, at this moment in time, correct me if I'm wrong.
Absolutely.
So what was your thought process? Because here you go from being corporate level, Realogy, 113 countries, all these different things. And I'm sure, when you at that point in time, you're looking at the Keller Williams, the Remaxes, all the big brokerages, right? And they all kind of did the same thing.
Sure.
I mean, and then all of a sudden, here comes EXP. And it's like, we're going to do multi-level marketing pretty much.
Yep.
Like in a way, right?
Yep.
We're going to do revenue share. And we're going to flip it upside down. And it's like, what was your thought at that point in time? Like, did you see that and be like, were you like, wow, this is the future?
No. I sort of, I saw that and I was intrigued. But I'm also very analytical, as I said. And so, I liked where Glenn's sort of, creativity was and what he wanted to do. And I met him in December of 2019 at Inman in New York. And we sat down for what was supposed to be like a half-hour meeting to talk about what a future of an EXP could look like. It ended up being a 4-hour meeting. And it was like, okay, I love creating. I love the creativity. And I got excited about that. And then when they actually offered me the position, I said, let me think about it. And then I pulled back and I started looking at every 10K they've ever filed. I'm like, what is this 7-level MLM thing? It's sort of like, I thought it was a Ponzi scheme. I really did. I thought it's sort of like someone's got to be left holding the bag. I read everything. I read every SEC public filing and because I knew how to read them.
Yeah, because you're SEC.
Well, it was with Realogy and then became with EXP as well. But because of my banking background, it was just sort of like, I knew how to read the filings. And so I'm like, this doesn't make sense to me. And so I said to Glenn, I want to meet with the board members and I want to meet with them separately. So I started calling the board members, and there was one that was in New York. His name was Randy Miles. And he was a brilliant mind in the financial world. Fitzgerald. He was a partner at Cantor Fitzgerald and was an early sort of partner at Goldman Sachs, and sort of like had an incredible, illustrious career in finance, and I knew who he was. And so we had dinner and we started talking, and so he talked me through the thing, and it was because of him that I said yes.
Really?
And he really sort of like made me feel comfortable and understood that there was no revenue share without revenue, right? It's not like it's Amway. You're not selling toothpaste and suitcases, right? So if you're not selling real estate, there is no revenue share to share. So I felt much more comfortable with that concept, and then I just went all in at that point, you know. And then there was some incredible growth that happened there.
Yeah, you went. So when you joined, roughly how many agents were
About
with
22,000 agents.
22,000.
Yeah.
And when
in
you
May
left,
of 2020. And when I left, it was just under 90.
just under 90.
And they
so
were in
22,000 to 90.
Yep. And they were in 3 countries, and I added another 21 countries in 2 years' time.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you literally, what is that, a 500% increase in amount of countries?
Yeah,
Something like that?
I remember not talking stock, but I remember when I joined, the stock price was at $8, and then at the height of COVID, it went to 140.
Yeah.
And we had a stock split, and the market cap went from 600 million to I think it was somewhere around 9 billion.
Yeah. You know, and a lot of people made a lot of money, right? And, you know, you have a lot of the big people that are still in, you know, at the top, and they've got 10, 20,000 people in their downline right now.
30 plus.
Right. And they're making a lot of money. And I want to kind of dive into that a little bit too. But so you did that. I guess one of my questions might be, right, while we're just right here, is what was your favorite part about that brokerage at that time, out of curiosity?
The growth. It was really the idea of growing the concept of what that was, because it was a really disruptive concept at the time. And when we actually were able to give that message on a global scale, and then it worked. Like the first country that I opened for EXP was South Africa.
Wow.
And that was opened in October of 2020. And to date, that company is now the 8th largest company in the country, with about 1,500 agents. And it feels good that, you know, that was just a germ of an idea.
So crazy.
That was a germ of an idea 4 years ago.
I have to ask, what does it look like to open a country? I mean, when we're talking about, like, you know, I mean, people might be wondering, right? Like, you get on an airplane, you go to South Africa, meet the mayor. I mean, what does it look like, you know?
Those 20 plus countries that I opened for EXP was in the middle of COVID, never jumped on a plane.
Wow.
And it was all done remotely. That had never been done in our industry before. And so that was pretty exciting. But to answer your question, it depends on the country. Every country is so incredibly different. And what was different for me was I spent 15 years from a franchise model. So coming in on a singular company model that's now cloud-based.
Right.
There was learning a lot of things in there, like all local laws. It's like we literally opened up a company and a country roughly every other month. It was about every 6 weeks.
Yeah.
It was insane. It was an incredible growth trajectory. And, you know, and it was almost too much. It was almost too fast of that growth, because then on the other side of it is the operations and infrastructure, which wasn't up to par with where the growth was.
Sure.
So there was some challenges on that side.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, we run a lot of companies not nearly the size of that, and anytime we've grown really quick in a really short period of time, you're kind of scrambling, right? Like things are falling apart. You're like, oh my God, you know. And it's what we do as entrepreneurs. We make a mess, and then we have to hire people to help us clean it up, right?
It's all right.
And
look, and some of that is fun too.
It is,
right? Because that's part of the process, right?
Sure.
And you start sort of talking about, you know, I was actually on the phone with Robert earlier today, and it's sort of like there was a couple of things that happened today that really are moving our trajectory forward in a warp speed. And I sort of said, we've got to remember these moments, because when we start telling the story of the LPT story now, we've got to remember these moments. And because things are happening in such a big way that we're going to be able to sort of say what we've just accomplished hasn't never been done in our industry. I said it with the last company and what we're building now. Because remember, everything you do, all your sets of talent and experience and everything else, when you take it somewhere else, it starts at a higher base. And And then when you start doing trajectory jumps, it's things that you can say it's never been done in the industry before because you did it before, and now that's your new floor. And then when you come somewhere else and you say, okay, now let's sort of play with the new talent that's here with what they bring, now your floor is elevated. So what you were able to accomplish as a ceiling in the last company becomes a floor here.
Yeah. At every ceiling, you have a new floor.
That's right.
Yeah. Walk me through the first time you heard about LPT. Was it at the Super Bowl, or did you hear about it? Because I know you met Robert there.
Yeah. So
when did you hear about it?
So I had heard about it, especially in the state of Florida. They were taking quite a few agents in Florida from EXP. It was the first time that you started hearing about it and understanding like what it was, and there were the agent hybrid choice. And it was one of these things where you start sort of like hearing about it, but for me, I've always sort of had that thing that why racehorses have blinders on, so that they always sort of see past the finish line and not so worried about what's to the right and to the left until you have to worry about it. And so then that was one of those things where, oh man, it's sort of like they're taking a lot of agents now. Who are they?
Yeah.
So it was one of those things that was probably around 21 where you started sort of like hearing a lot of it. But because you were in such hyper growth mode, you didn't care that much, right? And so it's sort of like, oh, we're just growing exponentially. And it's actually a good lesson. It's sort of like to really sort of like look at who's out there that's building a better mousetrap by your mistakes, right? And then coming in and sort of like showing, what the opportunities are. And that Achilles heel could be where you actually do fail.
Sure. Yeah, the blinders could end up hurting you.
That's right.
Right? If you're not careful.
That's right.
Because to some degree, Oprah Winfrey said a long time ago, your mind's like a parachute. If it ain't open, it don't work.
That's right.
Right? And if you don't have an open mind to look at another model, then that might be the very thing that'll kill you.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I met Robert at the Super Bowl this year, and this was Andy Florins, CEO of CoStar, had invited the top 40 executives in the real estate space to come over to the Super Bowl because they were pushing homes.com and things like that. And so they wanted everyone to really feel comfortable in a part of the environment. And it was a great, I mean, he's a great host, by the way. And so I walked in there, and 20 years in this business, I knew everyone in the room except for Robert. And Robert was there with his wife, Jill. And so my first thing is if I'm in a room where I don't know somebody, I'm going to go talk to them.
Say hi.
Because I know everybody else, right? It's sort of like it would be a missed opportunity. And so we sat down, we started watching the game, and it was like, oh, he's actually not the monster that everyone's painting him out to be. And we really did get along. We exchanged phone numbers at that point. We just kept in touch. And sort of like meeting started happening organically in different cities. And the idea of what he was building was exciting. And then we sort of like came to a understanding, and I was really excited about what he was building and what I thought I can help with accelerating that plan. And it's proven to be such.
Yeah. When did you officially join LPT?
So I joined, it was 8 weeks ago.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Like officially.
Yeah, it was at Inman.
Inman, okay.
That first day of Inman is when we broke the story.
Wow.
Yeah.
Super crazy.
Yeah. Actually, it was a week before Inman because we were going to break it at Inman. And so we decided to sort of do a week before. And then we had a lot of that momentum happening during Inman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What part of LPT, if let's just talk about one thing, like the main thing, and then we'll break it down.
Sure.
What's like, if you could just say one thing why LPT blows every brokerage out of the water, what would that thing be?
I think it's the leadership, first and foremost, right? I think that there's that visionary that you always need to be steering that ship, right? You've got to sort of buy the story, and then you can build the elements. So the idea of agent choice is fantastic. I think that's one of the greatest sort of things for LPT. But I think when you start looking at where the future is and you work backwards into it, that's the equation that I love, right? So everything that we're building, the idea of creating different buckets for an agent where you truly can say this is your brokerage for life. So the agent choice model of 100% commission for the agents, somebody being on the 80-20 split and building a downline, or now the idea of presenting a standalone brokerage model to compete in the luxury space. That is super exciting to me.
You really have 3 different options.
We really do.
For an agent, right?
100%.
So before, and I'll just say it, when you look at EXP and you look at Real, okay? Because Real came out, in my opinion, and I'm sure you have an opinion, and when I looked at Real, I was like, how are they different from EXP? Like, they like changed a thing here or there, but it wasn't different enough.
Right.
For me to get excited about it.
Sure.
Right? I was just like, it's the same thing with like a slightly different thing, right? And instead of 7 levels, you have however many levels or whatever it might be, whatever the little fine changes that they made. Now LPT comes, because with these 2 brokerages, and I, by the way, Michael, we have a 160 agent team right now, right? At the time I had probably a 50 agent team, and I saw it with my own eyes. People join EXP or Real or whatever, they get on this revenue share model, and they have no interest in building the downline. They just want to sell real estate.
That's right.
Right? And I saw it time and time and time again, and they would leave over that very thing.
That's right.
Because they're like, hey, this is great, but I don't care about it.
That's right.
I want to sell houses.
Yep.
And I'm giving away too much of my commission when this isn't even a model that I would have chose to be on otherwise. And the cloud-based this and cloud-based that, and it doesn't make up the gap of the cost of being there for that type of agent. Now, obviously, it worked really well for the agents that wanted to build huge downlines and make a ton of money, right?
Those that came in early.
Those that came in early.
Right.
And these are the top, 1%, 5%, 10%, right? So the 90% at the bottom, real hard, real difficult, right?
Absolutely.
So LPT comes along and they say, okay. And see, by the way, you would lose these people. For me, I watch it time and time again. They go from EXP or Real to HomeSmart.
That's right.
To My Home Group.
Yes.
To fill
United,
in the blank.
right.
Yep, whatever.
Yeah.
Flat fee, 100% model.
So true.
$700 transaction fee, whatever it might be, right? And they would stay there, right? So the only way for people to get what they want is to leave the brokerage. But you just said something interesting. You said the lifetime brokerage.
Yep.
LPT is the lifetime brokerage. LPT is the brokerage you join if you're an agent and you stay at for a lifetime.
That's right.
Even through the different seasons of your life. Maybe you're joining your 20s and you want flat fee, you want to sell a bunch of real estate.
That's right.
And then in your 30s, you're like, I want to build my downline. And you switch to the rev share model.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And then you eventually say, I want to get into the luxury world.
Yep.
And you switch over, you say, okay, I'm going to start my own brokerage underneath the brokerage.
That's it.
My own team brokerage, luxury model, right?
You got it.
So it really is the lifetime brokerage. So walk me through that. I mean, was that just Robert daydreaming? I mean, Robert really well, right? And Robert's a brilliant guy. How did he come up with this?
Well, he had the agent choice model that he created because he's really smart and he saw exactly what you said. EXP, Real, Fathom, whatever. It's sort of like people were losing people to flat fee brokerage models, right? And that's where the majority went to. So he says, why not just build one? Why not just going to give them the choice? Does somebody want to build a downline? Great. Somebody wants to be in a flat fee? Fantastic. And you captured the majority of those folks. Then you also perfected the team model. Yep. You had the team leader coming in on an 80-20 split. Some of the other brokerages have a blended rate that has to come back to the team lead, and the economics really hurt the agents on that team. And now we're sort of saying, why are we going to do that? Let the team lead run the team the way they see fit. They built it. So all you have to do is sort of like come in on the 80-20 for LPT and then sort of say to all of your agents, you're on the 100% model, and then the team lead can decide what the economics within that team structure looks like.
Sure.
And it sort of like makes perfect sense, right? Makes perfect sense. Now,
perfect sense.
The idea of creating the standalone luxury brand, Robert now sort of like jokes about it. He had held it back because he thought that me being at EXP would be the only person that could have built it because of my luxury experience at Sotheby's for 15 years and then having the cloud space. And then when we got to the conversations, and then obviously when I came here, he accelerated it. He was going to do it post IPO.
Okay.
But now we actually sort of said, because I'm here and can help lead it, then we're doing it pre-IPO and actually adding it to the offering that we're doing, which actually increases our gross margin for the for the IPO and for our finance table. So it's a really great story at this point.
So cool.
Yeah.
I want to dive a little deeper into it. I have a question right now, and that is, one of my questions out of the gate, and I now have the answer to this question, I believe. I'd love to get yours. Why can't EXP or Real or one of these other brokerages just introduce the flat fee on top of what they're already doing? Like, what's the biggest reason, in your opinion, why they can't just make that pivot?
Well, because the economics aren't there, right? It's just you can't start it halfway through because you're not going to be able. You'll probably lose
because you have shareholders. You have all the guys at the top making all the rev share.
You're going to lose half of your agent count.
Right.
It's going to go to the 100% model, and those that have already sort of are counting on that rev share. It's just not going to work.
Yeah.
It's just way too difficult. You can't sort of decide once the meal is cooked to sort of like put salt while the water is boiling.
Sure.
It just doesn't happen.
It doesn't work. You got somebody making $400,000 a month in revenue share, and they wake up tomorrow, they're making $50,000 a month. They're gone.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. You just can't do
Yeah.
it. So LPT.
What was your answer to that?
Same exact thing.
Okay.
Same exact thing, right? Shareholders, the stock, the fact that you're IPO, you're a public company, right? You have all the guys making all the money at the top.
Then you also have a margin.
80% of the company. I mean, you can't just change the entire.
Yeah.
Because that is the whole foundation of a brokerage. I mean, like when we're talking about how people get paid,
sure,
right? If you change the very thing of how people make their living, you're going to make a lot of people very unhappy.
Well, think of it from the other side, from a corporate side. There's margins that you've already sort of spent, right? From a corporate side, because that's your operating income.
Sure.
And if you actually sort of look at doing other ancillary businesses or things that you've already committed to, you're counting on that income coming in. And if that income goes to 80% of it, because people are at 100% model now, you can't operate your business.
Sure. Makes sense. Robert Palmer's taken how many companies public pre this company that's about to go public? One or two?
Well, taking it public, no.
Didn't he take a IPO company, or was a part of an IPO at some point in time?
So I don't know the story to that. It's sort of like, so I will let you ask Robert when you interview him.
Well, then I'll ask him when I interview him. Okay.
Yeah, I can't tell you that he has built several companies.
Massive companies.
Yes. I don't think he's actually taken one IPO that he has built, but they have been massive companies, and he's got the roadmap to this, right? He actually, think about believing in yourself in such a way that he started his mortgage company from nothing.
Yeah.
And every bit of investment that came in, he reinvested into it to the tune of $150 million over a 6-year period of time in advertising.
Yeah.
Now imagine what you have to sort of believe in yourself, so much so that you've got $100 million in your bank account, and you're saying to your wife, and you're sort of saying, let's take all this money and put it back in the business.
Right.
And it's sort of like, say what? It's like, that's a really big belief in yourself, and then running that and showing that he was right. And then that becomes $1 billion company, and then be able to sort of do that again with a marketing company, which was Listing Power Tools.
Yeah.
That became the groundstone of what LPT is as a brokerage. And so to sort of now, and then, has gone in and has bought a sports team with the Jacksonville Armada, is now building the stadium there. So this is a man that has taken a lot of risks in a lot of different sectors and is now sort of doing this in such a way that he's not going public to raise money. He's going public to make the agents shareholders of the company. And that's a huge difference. He doesn't need the money. He has actually gone in and has self-funded this from the start.
Yeah. And that is a difference maker, right? Somebody who starts a company that doesn't need to. They're freaking set. You look at Robert, he was set. He didn't need to start LPT.
Nope.
He was set, right? But he started it because he saw a gap in the industry, and
100%.
He felt an obligation to right the wrongs, to correct the things that other people weren't correcting, that other people weren't fixing. He saw an opportunity that he just couldn't turn down. It wasn't that he needed that. It wasn't that he needed the money. And I think that's a huge difference maker in the way that somebody's able to approach building and scaling.
That's exactly right.
You're not coming from a place of fear.
No.
You're coming from a place of abundance.
Imagine what we were saying earlier, stepping into your future.
Yeah.
Right. If sort of like if you had $100 million that came in profit on your mortgage company, and it's sort of like, dude, I'm set. This is awesome. It's sort of like, and then sort of saying, nope, because my vision is greater than that.
Yeah.
My vision is greater than what that is. And we're going to take that money and make that the reality.
I love that. Break down very quickly LPT, so Listing Power Tools. So it was a marketing company. He owned a marketing company, big print company.
He owns his own print shop in Central Florida. And Listing Power Tools was actually a brand agnostic company that started in 2016. And that was, there's agents from other brokerages that used it and know it and know of him from it.
The white box.
The white box, man, the white box. And then it became... It actually did become that toolkit. You know, agents are not the best marketers at times, right? And when you sort of like said, "Fine, I'll do it for you," I'll sort of I'll give you the roadmap. I'll give you the roadmap, and you start sort of seeing these people that are now sort of like closing transactions. And you know, when you actually sort of give somebody the tools for success and they implement it, it actually gives them that power to now sort of believe in themselves. And that's a beautiful thing, right? It's sort of like, and that's what really moved him.
Yeah.
And it's incredible to sort of see what that trajectory is. You know, his why are his two little girls. Yeah. You know, he's got a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old little girl that, you know, have already melted my heart. And, you know, it's like, you know, now I feel protective for them because that's his why. And, you know, and it sort of like shifts your vision.
It's so cool. You know, what he's doing. And they're going to take it IPO.
Yes,
they're going to take the company public. Roughly when?
We're looking at Q4 of next year. We're aiming for sometime in September of next year. JP Morgan will be taking lead. They're very excited about this. They've invited us next month for an investment conference that they're doing in Miami, where they're highlighting their pre-IPO companies for next year.
Wow.
And so they've invited just a few companies to be there to start meeting with the investment community and letting them ask the initial questions. So that's a super exciting thing.
Yeah, very cool. I'm excited to be a part of that journey. And,
absolutely.
You know, I think anybody watching, you know, you got to get on board while you can, you know.
There's only one time in life that a company does
right now,
pre-IPO.
Right? Yeah, pre-IPO. Yeah. 14,000 agents right
now?
Give
or take, yeah.
Okay, give or take. Maybe 13. Technically, the fastest growing brokerage of all time. If you look at the length of time.
Exactly right. It's the fastest growing brokerage in the cloud space. So the idea that they able to get 10,000 agents in less than 2 years. It took EXP 10 years to get to that threshold, and it took Real 8 years.
So wild.
So to sort of think about that trajectory in a 2-year span of time, and then what we are going to be doing with these new things before year end. So 18 new states and 3 Canadian provinces before the end of the year.
Wow.
Plus the launch of Aperture.
I love that.
Yeah.
So you're scaling big, you know, 2025, right? 2026. How many countries do you see in the next 24 months?
Look, it's all about being strategic, right? I'd love to get a footprint into Europe in the early part of next year. There's some countries that I'm looking at to be quite strategic in that area. Looking at maybe Mexico a little bit differently, looking at maybe some states in Mexico instead of the whole country. The states that operate in US dollars, sort of like Cabo, Puerto Vallarta, some other areas. We're going to do this strategically because everything that we are going to be opening will take an investment, right? And so we want to make sure that we have a very strong balance sheet for IPO, and then making sure that whatever our story is going to be, that the story makes sense for all of the agents as you sort of go out. So think about it as though you were opening up a shopping mall. You want to make sure that you've got your anchor tenant, right? You want to make sure that you've got your Apple store in there first. So for us, it's going to be Canada because that's where it makes the most sense. And then we'll do the strategic alliances from there. But we'll definitely look at Europe for next year.
So we're in a rapidly changing industry. You know, real estate somebody told me a long time ago, they said, real estate's kind of behind a lot of other industries in a way.
Yeah.
You look at kind of the real estate industry, you compare it maybe to the stock market or other industries, and it is a little bit more archaic in a lot of ways. I mean, it's just a little behind, right?
Sure.
You look at the way transactions are done from title and escrow to the whole package, right? Where do you see, I think there's a lot of people watching that fear that change because they don't know if they're going to have a place in that change.
Mm-hmm.
In your opinion, what do you think the future holds for the real estate agent and the real estate industry as a whole?
Look, I think that there's been a lot of noise in our industry, right? There's been the lawsuits. There's been the NAR stuff that's been happening. There's been a lot of noise. There have been agents that have left the industry. There's been, it was a very rapid rise for a lot of years. Anyone who entered the industry in, 2021 that was watching Bravo reality shows on real estate and thinking everybody was going to get a Lambo. And the worst part of it is that some of them did.
Yeah.
Right. And so now when the market shifted, they're out of the business because it was just sort of like, well, that's not what I was expecting. And it's sort of like it goes back to the basics of really understanding what you do and what your value is to a transaction. Mm-hmm. If you actually come in and you become invaluable to somebody, you become priceless. Commission doesn't matter. And that's a really important sort of takeaway. Look, the whole thing about the business thing on a global scale, business and real estate is done very differently around the world. So this idea of buyer's commission going away, most of Europe is a one-sided deal in the commission.
It's already that way.
It is already that way. In Australia, properties are sold via auction. If you're looking at auction here, it's usually a liquidation. If you're looking at an auction in Australia, it's the way that it's done. So it's sort of like on a macro level, on a global scale, real estate is done very differently around the world. So the idea that we're transitioning in the way that we do real estate is actually a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a good thing because now the idea of decoupling commissions, I'm more than excited about. Most people are sort of thinking it's the end of the world, but that also goes back to a limiting mindset. It also goes back to, did you prefer that your commission and what you were going to be paid and your worth and your salary was dictated by someone you didn't know? The cooperating broker?
Yeah.
You prefer that.
Crazy.
It's sort of like, it is insane.
Yeah.
When you actually sort of think about that, where you were really comfortable and you felt really comfortable by someone doing a co-broke situation that was probably not even in your own firm, somebody you didn't even know, that you're fine with. But now sort of saying, you can go negotiate whatever the hell you want to. You get to say what you're worth. And then all of a sudden people are like, I don't like that.
Yeah.
Why not?
You know what's interesting about that really quick?
Yeah.
Is we run a big team, right?
Right.
And our average commission went up
Of course it did.
when the NAR thing came out.
Of course it did.
Like literally
Yes.
over the last couple months, our commission has been trending up.
Dude, of course.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point. There's people that are leaving the industry. Great. There's less noise out there. Fantastic. That's great.
Good.
Love it.
Good.
Love it.
I'll take it.
All day long. Right? It's sort of like, now that might sound counterintuitive for the growth guy. Get out of the way.
Yeah.
Get out of the way.
Let the right people come.
Go fire your friends, right?
Yeah.
It goes back to that. If you're the right person, that's who I want you here. If you're the right person that sort of like believes in yourself, that believes in the growth that you can do, that believes that you've got no limitations, come on, let's go for this ride.
Game over, baby.
Let's go for this ride.
Michael, we run a team called Space Real Estate. We just did a brand in the year 2024. We did a merger. Keith is sitting here back behind the camera. We changed brokerages, right? We also went from EXP to LPT, just like you in January of 2024. And we did the name change from KP Elite / Zaback Group to Space Real Estate. Our goal, Michael, is to be the first, I think probably the first ever or the largest ever residential retail real estate team that doesn't ever become a brokerage. We have no interest in becoming a broker. We want to hang our hat with LPT, right?
Yeah.
Nationally and then potentially internationally in the future. What do you think about that?
Come on.
Come on, baby.
Come on. It's like, look, that's a whole sort of thing. You know, we've said a couple of times, like, we've done things that have never been done before. That's my specialty. Let's bring it on.
Let's keep doing it.
I love it.
I love it. Hey, Michael, I really appreciate you being here. I know you're a busy guy. I know that you're traveling all the way till Christmas, like we talked about, and means the world to me that you took the time to be on here, and I'm sure that we'll have you back on in the future.
I would love that, brother.
Thank you very much.
Man.
Hey, if you're still watching the episode, do me a huge favor. Go follow Michael Valdes. We'll put all of his information down in the description below. If you're a team leader, okay, you're an agent, look, be open-minded, right? Be open-minded. If you want to talk to me, if you want to talk to Michael, reach out, right? We'd love to have a conversation with you. Even if you hate it, it doesn't matter, right? Hear about it. You know, be open-minded. If I wouldn't have been open-minded, you know, we wouldn't be where we're at today.
That's right.
And I really attribute having an open mind to being here, and I'm very grateful that we're here. I appreciate you as always, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.